Greetings and thank you for watching Climate Check on ZNBC TV. Thank you so much for choosing this channel. So today on the program, we'll be discussing something very, very important. Now, with 1 week to go before the whole world converges at the biggest climate change conference, this is COP28 in Dubai, we are compelled to look at some of the key issues that have to be discussed at COP28. And also in studio, I will be talking to someone very, very special, and he chairs the African Group of Negotiators. So what is the AGN? Now, the African Group of Negotiators on Climate Change, AGN, was established at COP1 in Berlin, Germany in 1995 as an alliance of African member states that represents the interests of the region in the international climate change negotiations with a common and unified voice. Welcome to Climate Check with me, Mary Mwikisa, and joining me in studio is Director Ephraim Shitima. He is Director Green Economy and Climate Change at the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment. But on this particular program, we're interested to talk to him as the chair of the African Group of Negotiators. Director, thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure is mine, Mary. Thank you.
All right. Now, before we delve into our conversation, I would like, first of all, to remind you of what happened at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, when Zambia assumed the chairmanship of the AGN. 2 years down the line, it looks like yesterday.
That is very true. Time was passed by so quickly, so much work to do. And of course, we celebrated assuming that chairmanship. And we are happy that we'll be handing over later this year.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mr. Shitima is here to give us more information about the African Group of Negotiators, his tenure for the past 2 years, our tenure as a country for the past 2 years, and of course, some of the preparations Zambia has put in place going into COP28. But for now, we'll take a short break, and remember, this program is brought to you courtesy of Zanaco.
Zambia is a vast land of opportunities.
Ichalo cha Zambia chali kwati nchende kalamba winga tola mobuta.
Akiopano ke kibuke. Etubatu tunakuya kulutwe.
Kuhula ni kukala zencha.
Kujalula miliango.
Kumasula maloto.
Kutwesha kuilayuma yamweke nine yasweja kukala.
Our success story has been growing Zambia for over 52 years, and we haven't looked back since. We're not just a Zambian bank.
Welcome to Zanaco.
We are Zambia's bank. Zanaco. Zambia, our home.
Welcome back to Climate Check, and of course we are hosting the chair of the African Group of Negotiators, who is also the Director Green Economy and Climate Change at the Ministry of Green Economy, and this is Ephraim Shitima. Now, Mr. Shitima, let's now look at the 2 year period that you have been leading the African Group discussing various issues to do with climate change. What are your reflections? Let's have a general overview of your tenure.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think we took over in December 2021, of course in Glasgow, as you indicated. We took over from Tangi,
Yes.
Gabon,
Yes.
from Central Africa. And of course, there were a lot of things that we needed to do. The Honorable Minister, Honorable Collins Nzovu, gave us a strict directives in terms of what we needed to achieve during our tenure of office. He outlined things that we needed to do. And I think looking back, we have addressed most of those issues. And we've been privileged to preside over the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And we are going to conclude with presiding over the COP28 in Dubai. And I think the record is quite good.
Let's look at some of the highlights of your tenure. What are some of the issues that you would point at?
Yeah, first of all, of course, chairing the African group entails that you coordinate the continent and ensure that you reach common position on a number of issues. And that means that you need to be able to convene the group, have meetings with them so that you discuss issues that are on the agendas and what will be the African position on this. On that, we've done very well. We have hosted the group in Zambia twice. We hosted them in 2022. Immediately we took over in March, we hosted them. Then again this year we did host them again in March when we did the training of the young female negotiators. I'll be talking about that later. But we've also had other meetings where we sit with the negotiators, go through the issues and identify the African priorities. What is key is to develop what we call the African common position. Each time we are going to the conference, you have the African common position, and this has to be cleared by the ministers, by the way.
Okay.
So this year we tabled the African common position before our ministers, all African ministers of environment in Ethiopia, during the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment. They clear that, and that's when we proceed into the negotiations. So that has been the focus. But I think some of the key highlights for me have been like a decision on the loss and damage
Yes,
fund.
definitely.
We presided over that, and it's something that was elusive for over 30 years, and to have a decision adopted, and Africa pushed very hard. Our own minister worked very late in the night to ensure that we get that done. It is one of the key milestones that we can point at. And we're looking forward to it being operational at COP28 so that the funds are available to support countries when they face the extreme climate events.
What has been the response or the support from other African countries during your tenure? How have you worked and collaborated with these countries?
Yeah, no, it has been very impressive. We've received a lot of support from our colleagues. First of all, to indicate that we've been in the process with them for quite long. So even when the Zambian name was floated for the candidates, we stood a very good chance. And so we've had a very good support. As you know, it's not just the country, but the whole continent. And we've also been very inclusive with advisors that we've appointed from other countries to work with, because Africa has 5 regions, and you have to balance that whenever you're making a decision. So you ensure that you have representation in these regions, you sit with them. No, we've enjoyed very good support from the colleagues.
Now, I'm glad you've spoken about the fact that Africa has 5 regions, and of course, we're dealing with the common issue of climate change, but the needs may be different. You have small island nations, you have countries like Zambia and many others. What has been the general assessment regards climate change impact response in these countries? Do you see the zeal in these countries to address climate change? Because there's an issue of funding, but we can't sit and do nothing.
That's true. That's very true. Well, Africa is diverse, of course. The 5 regions, the different conditions, both geographically but even socio-economically. You have countries that are quite advanced and well-resourced. They are not at the same level. But we also have the poorest among the, out of the about 46 least developed countries, about 38 or so are in Africa. So you can understand the complexity. In terms of the determination to address climate change across the continent, you can see that. And this is clearly demonstrated in the action plans that countries have put in place. You and I know the national determined contributions.
Yes.
They are the most ambitious across the globe. So African countries are very much determined, and you can see it in their plans. But of course, the challenge comes to implementation, the support that is required to implement. And it's not that the countries are not doing much of what they can do domestically. Most countries are spending up to 90% of their GDP addressing climate change. So they are doing a lot even with the meager resources that they may have, but it is just that the challenge is huge. And also for historical responsibility purposes, the developed countries need to provide the needed support.
Let's talk about the loss and damage, which for me is something really momentous for Africa, and I'm glad that it happened during your tenure at COP27. Let us understand its background and how we got to where we are.
First of all, in responding to climate change, there are only 2 ways. One is that we reduce the greenhouse gases. We deal with the gases that are causing the problem, and so we refer to that as mitigation. In fact, it's the ultimate solution. Ultimately, we need to just address the emissions so that global warming is addressed. But then we are already experiencing the impacts, so we need to do something about that, to adjust our activities so that we can continue growing our economies, we can continue surviving and having our livelihoods not disrupted by climate change. And those activities, we refer to them as adaptation. But there are cases where you cannot adapt. the extreme climate event such as a flood sweeps through a town, damages everything, including livelihoods are lost and lives, people killed. I like going to the issue, the sad incident we had in Libya, a town in Libya a few months ago, where over 20,000 people were killed in a flash flood. You cannot adapt to that. So loss and damage is intended to support countries when they experience extreme climate events like that. It's beyond adaptation. It may not be just extreme climate events. We also refer to slow onset events. Sea level rise, for example, is not extreme, but it can happen slowly.
Gradually.
Exactly, but it can inundate some coastal zones. You have the melting of ice, for example, may not be extreme event, but it's a slow onset, but quite devastating. So when such events occur, it's no longer adaptation, that is loss and damage. And because you need response that is quite prompt, both in terms of making the funds available, the existing financing mechanisms that we have are not fitted for purpose. Because you need to do proposals, they need to be evaluated, and then you are given the resources. That is the background for a loss and damage. We've been looking for a fund that would be able to respond immediately that disaster occurs and provide the required support to countries.
Now, going through a bit of literature, I came across figures that 3.3 billion US dollars was worth of property was destroyed during Cyclone Idai that affected Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And this is this infrastructure means livelihoods for people, a source of income for people. But we don't seem to have a proper sustainable response to such issues, and I believe this is what we're addressing by loss and damage. How sure are we that should this be implemented, it will be accessible and quickly too?
Yeah, those are the areas of interest we have in establishing this loss and damage fund. As you know, the last meeting for a working group that has been working out modalities of this fund was held in Abu Dhabi just about 2 weeks ago on the 3rd and 4th of November. And the focus is to ensure that this fund is triggered. Once an event occurs, it triggers the release of the funds to an affected country. But we also want to ensure that the resources that are made available are adequate to address the challenge. So the issue of adequacy is important. For a start, we are talking of starting with probably $100 billion as the basic minimum in the fund to just get it started. But we are calling for more. We are hoping that more resources can be made available, because as you see, the impacts are across the globe. It's not just one or two countries. It's not just Africa. You have small island developing states and all those experience such events. So we need a fund that is well resourced, but accessibility, easy access is of paramount importance.
How are we faring regards I would like to call it the historic $100 billion pledge. We don't know whether it's a pledge or what to call it now to Africa. And before you came in as chair, this has been pending. You're going to hand over soon, still pending. How are we faring?
Yeah, the $100 billion per year is promised in 2009 in Copenhagen by developed countries. This has been problematic. One is that it was promised to be delivered by 2020, that these funds would be made available. What they tell us, our counterparts, is that they are confident they will meet that target end of 2023, that it is going to be met. That the only issue is that in terms of preparing their reports under the OECD, it has a time lag of 2 years, so we can only confirm that by 2025. But we have problems with that because it's a promise that has demonstrated a deficit in confidence, because it has taken so long, and to tell our people that no, we won't be able to confirm until 2025, it is difficult. But also one key issue we want to confirm once these reports are on the table is that we are indeed talking about climate finance, because we are not supposed to just count all the support that have been given to countries as climate finance. For example, the support under COVID, other official development assistance, that is not part of the $100 billion. Climate finance is climate finance and needs to be very clear.
Let's talk about COP28, which is in almost a week's time. Is Africa ready?
Yes, Africa is ready for COP28. Again, we have facilitated 3 preparations this year as a chair. We had the first preparatory workshop in Livingstone. I talked about that. I think from the 14th to the 17th of March, we brought our colleagues from Africa and we started our preparations. Then we had our second preparatory meeting in Germany. We took advantage of the June sessions in Germany, in Bonn. We prepared for that. But then just before the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi, again, we took advantage of that because we also had to provide advice to the summit. So we met in Nairobi and continued preparing for COP28. So we are ready finally in Ethiopia, where we presented the African Common Position and our ministers endorsed that. So we are ready to engage at COP28.
What are some of the key issues that Africa is hungry for going into this conference and hoping that COP28 will deliver?
Yeah, 4 things that I can talk about, Mary. First of all, generally, what we want is to build on the successes that we scored in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. We had deliverables there that came out which are important. And again, we'll go back to the Loss and Damage Fund. It's the major priority. We want it operational at COP28, and by operational we mean its governance instrument adopted by our ministers and a clear source of where the funds will come from, agreed upon, and the amounts, so that going into 2024 you are only recruiting staff and putting mechanisms in place for it to start operating effectively. So that one will be a milestone. The second one, as you know, COP28 here in 2023 is the year for the global stock take. Basically, from the time that the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, we set a mid-term period to take stock of how much we are progressing in meeting its goals. For example, where are we in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees? So we'll be taking stock this year at this conference. Are we meeting these goals? And for us, it's important. It's not just one goal, which is the temperature goal. It is very important, but we also need to look at other goals. There's a financing goal. How much resources are required to meet this goal? There is a goal on adaptation as well. How are we meeting this? So this is a year that we are going to take stock of achievements on this. But most importantly, as we take stock, is the corrective action. What do we do? Because we already know that there are gaps. If we are not meeting the temperature goal, we are not meeting the financing goal, we are not meeting the adaptation goal. So what do we need to do to correct that, to ensure that we get back on track to address those? So that is very important, the global stock take. The technical level is done. We are now handing over to our ministers. There is a report on the table, and our ministers will be engaging on that. The third item is the global goal on adaptation. You and I are familiar with that. And the last one is the just transition. Countries need to move away from carbon-intensive development pathways to low carbon development, particularly the energy transition, and we are saying we need support as countries to transition. And so those are some of the key issues that will be tabled at COP28.
All right, this is Climate Check. We take a short break. We'll be right back on the other side as we wrap up.
Zambia is a vast land of opportunities.
Ikyalo kya Zambia kyalikwata enkyende ekalamba ewingatoolamu obuta.
Akiopano kekibuke. Etubatu tunakuya kulutwe.
Kuhula ni kukala zencha.
Kujalula milyango.
Kumasula maloto.
Kutwesha kuilayuma yamweke nine yasweja kukala.
Our success story has been growing Zambia for over 52 years, and we haven't looked back since. We're not just a Zambian bank.
Welcome to Zanaco.
We are Zambia's bank. Zanaco. Zambia, our home.
Welcome back to Climate Check, and we're hosting the chair of the African Group of Negotiators, Mr. Ephraim Shitima, who is also Director of Green Economy and Climate Change at the Ministry of Green Economy. Ministry of Green Economy and Environment. Now, Mr. Shitima, let's bring it back home. You spoke earlier about training of young female negotiators, and this got me interested because I think it's a sustainable way of grooming future negotiators.
That's very true. It's one of the priorities when the minister, and I remember it was on 6th January 2022, that was our first official meeting, meeting the AGN. He made it clear that we need to grow the group, and by growing the group, we need to train young negotiators.
Yes.
And if there is a group that you need to focus on, it's the women. For two reasons. One, the women are the caregivers at home. They're the people who are basically nurturing the families, and climate change is impacting the families. So they need to be sitting on the table in decision making. And I'm happy that we took up that challenge. In 2022, we trained 46 young female negotiators from across the continent. And again, it was in Livingstone. We took advantage of sharing, and we brought everyone to Livingstone. After training those 46, we selected 10, and by the way, we ensured that we had 3 Zambians in there in the training. We selected 10 whom we started exposing to the actual negotiating process. They were with us when we were in Germany this year, in Bonn, and we are taking a few to COP28. So this is to ensure that this can be taking over the mantle. Most of us are aging now and should be handing over to them, but particularly the young female, because they are underrepresented in the negotiations, but they are the most meticulous. I work mostly with female negotiators. I think you've seen most of my deputies. You can count on them. When you give an assignment, they know it is urgent, you get your talking notes on time. And sometimes with my male counterparts, it's not as easy as that. No, it's not. So it's important.
Let's talk about the preparedness as a wrap-up, Zambia's preparedness to go into COP28.
At the country level, because the fact that we are chairing means we need to lead from the front and ensure that we are prepared ourselves as a country. Again, we've had 3 workshops in which we've prepared ourselves as a country and finalized our country position, because after you have developed the African common position, then you need to, in fact, for us, we started with our Zambian country position, then ensured that it fed into the African position, but then continued refining it. So we have met about 3 times, and we think that we are ready to participate. If I may just highlight a few other things, particularly from the AGN perspective, apart from training the young female negotiators and also the other works, we were very eager to ensure that we help the group develop some guidelines as a governance document. And with support from the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, we have developed a governance document for the African group of negotiators. We hope it gets adopted at this session. On the training of young female negotiators, I forgot to acknowledge we had support from UNDP. These are some of the partners that we've worked with. But we've also commissioned the studies, because you need to research. We had support again from UNDP to do studies on gender and climate change, to see how countries are integrating gender in that. So we've done quite a number of things, and we're hoping as we hand over, we will have something to be proud of as we look back.
So how does it happen? You're handing over. So when COP28 officially begins, you are still presiding over the conference.
Yes, correct.
At what point are you handing over?
Officially, when we arrive there, by the way, it's East Africa who has to take over. We'll be given, if they have finished their consultations, who the candidate is, and we start working with them so that the handover is smooth. My term of office ends on 31st December 2023. The new chair only assumes office on 1st January 2024. But because we use the COP as a ceremonial handover so that people know who the incoming chair is, but effectively they take over in 2024.
And as I let you go, Chair, looking back over a period of 2 years, are you fulfilled?
Yes. First of all, it is a privilege as a country. I think out of over 50 countries on the continent, to be identified and said Zambia should lead, I think it's something that we should be proud of. It elevates our credentials as a country in terms of diplomacy and all that. But also at the individual level, it is a privilege that I took with humility. And the support from government has been very massive, which has made us make this achievement. So yes, looking back, it's a very successful and humbling experience.
All right. We can only say congratulations, and we're proud of you as a country. And I mean, this has been an honor for Zambia, and we have no doubts that you have, diligently handled this role.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming to the program.
It was my pleasure. Thanks.
All right. This has been Climate Check. We were talking to the outgoing chairperson of the African Group of Negotiators, who is our very own Mr. Ephraim Shitima, and he is also based at the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment as Director of Green Economy and Climate Change. Thank you so much for having joined us on Climate Check. Remember, COP28 is just in about a week's time. Ensure that you follow the proceedings wherever you are in this country and understand some of the decisions and policies that will pop up from there, because ultimately they affect your life and my life. My name is Mary Mwekisa. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.